Hey, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe and Mary Kay Cabot with you here, recording this Wednesday about 3:45. And today we are going to talk free agents, some players on the Browns that are entering the final years of their contracts. And Mary Kay, there's some significant names that are coming up for free agency, and also some role players as well that might make for some interesting decisions, some guys fighting for jobs. So we decided to kind of take a step back and look at some of the guys that are entering contract years, big years for them. And I think the first name to start with, probably the biggest name on this list, and the guy that certainly got some attention during the offseason program because he was there, but not participating in team drills. Now, he was also at the voluntary portion, so probably nothing there as far as a holdout or a hold in is concerned. But Grant Delpit, entering the final year of his deal, former second round pick, has already been extended once. We know the Browns are very, very big on this three safety look. They've got Ronnie Hickman, another guy we'll talk about. They just drafted Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. With Grant Delpit, I guess the question for me is is it a matter of if or a matter of when for Grant Delpit when we talk extension?
I think it's a matter of when. I really do. I think that especially with the way that Ephraim Banda and those guys talked about Grant and how valuable he was during OTAs when he was there helping out and mentoring, and the way he did the same thing in mini camp. The vibes are good around Grant. And there were a lot of rumors flying around that he was conducting a hold-in, and that's just not the case. You could look over there at any point in time and he had a big smile on his face and he was talking to the guys and just engaged in doing all kinds of things along those lines. So this was not a contract hold-in. Not what this was about. And I'll tell you what, if he wanted to make a contract stand, he just would not have shown up. You don't come to OTAs if you are trying to complain about your contract. You don't show up for voluntary OTAs, and he did that. So I think we can rest assured that this is a matter of when they do an extension, not if. They think very highly of him. They've stuck by him through rupturing the Achilles as a rookie. And, and he's played really, really good ball for them. And I still think he's got plenty of years left in the tank. And I think that they will reflect that. I think he'll get paid. And I think it will probably happen maybe even before the season, maybe before training camp. But I think it's coming, and I think that he deserves it.
And we've seen situations too, and I don't know that this is that situation, but we've seen situations too where, guys maybe don't participate in team drills or something because they're working on an extension, or, they know that there's some negotiations going on. So it's not exactly like a hold in, but sometimes it's like, let's just make sure we're protecting you while we kind of work this out. Again, I don't know that that's what's going on here, but it seems like Grant is still all in. And the thing is, so he's 27, he turns 28 on September 20th. And I thought he probably had his best year last year. And it feels like they've just sort of figured out exactly how they want to use him. They've kind of figured out, sort of finally embraced this idea that he really is just best near the line of scrimmage, and he's best disrupting, is almost sort of that hybrid, linebacker safety as opposed to playing deep too much. So I think him finding his role, he's also found his voice a little bit. And I think we talk about leadership in that locker room, I think he's one of those guys, and his locker is he's kind of got that leadership locker. That's where Anthony Walker was, and that's where Jordan Hicks was, and now Grant is over there in the locker room. So I just think he's sort of embraced his role. He played a lot of special teams last year. It just makes too much sense, I think. And I don't think you'd have to overpay to keep him. I think you could come up with a pretty friendly deal to keep him around for another 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I think so. A good safety like that, with that kind of experience, that kind of leadership, is hard to find. And he plays all those roles really, really well. And this football team needs some veteran leaders. It's such a young team. You can't leave them short in the leadership department, because that is going to get you where you want to go in terms of playoffs and making the postseason and winning football games and getting through the tough times. You need to have those guys. And they just lost Joel Bitonio. We know that Myles Garrett is gone. They got Jared Verse in return, but he's new, so it might take him a little while to find his leadership voice. But Grant already has his. We know Denzel already has his. So it's important to keep those kind of guys around. And I'm almost positive that we will hear something about a Grant Delpit extension at some point over the next few months. Don't know if it will stretch into the season, but I definitely think he's on their radar for being wrapped up over the next few years.
Yeah, and we always talk about that good guy award that Joe Bitonio used to always clean up on, and Grant was one of the guys who I know a few of us voted for him for that this year. Again, I just think he's really, to your point, like leadership is so important on a young team. And if we go back to sort of the last time they did like a real rebuild, and this was obviously more extreme than what they're doing now, they just didn't keep enough veterans around. And I think this time they've avoided that mistake, and Andrew Berry has avoided that mistake, and he's kept guys like Delpit, and he's signed a Malik Collins. He's added veterans who can kind of teach these guys how to be pros, and eventually pass the torch to a guy like a Carson Schlesinger, or even a Jared Verse to be the next in line as the leaders in that room. So I think Grant fits that mix. Now, another guy, same position, who's going to be playing on his restricted free agent tender, Ronnie Hickman. He signed that actually during minicamp. So he's here for another year. Maybe they're working on something long term with him. I know Andrew Berry views that as a win for this football team, a former undrafted free agent who's started 17 games last year. And again, another guy that I think last season, much like Grant, probably had his best season. And also, much like Grant, maybe not perfect, maybe not, he's not going to make Pro Bowls. He's not going to be like, a superstar at that position, but I think he's really kind of figured out his role. But he's a little trickier to me, especially because, if you are going to extend Grant and you just drafted Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, to me with Ronnie Hickman, it comes down to how much is it going to cost to keep him around past this year, and sort of what does it look like this year playing on that tender.
Right. I have to wonder if they don't want to see how things play out a little bit with E-Man. That's short for Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, of course. They might want to see how things play out with him, because if he is their safety of the future, and I believe that he is as a second round pick, then you don't necessarily want to invest a ton of money in Ronnie Hickman. You might want to let that play out a little bit, or maybe he might want to test the market a bit. So even though they value him highly, and even though they will be playing a lot of these three safety looks, you just don't know from a financial standpoint if you can pay all three of them over the next several years, how much they're each going to be due. Now, of course, E-Man is going to be on his rookie contract for the next 4 years, but we'll have to see the investment that they might want to make in Ronnie. I don't know if an extension is forthcoming for him anytime soon or not. Maybe they want to let him go out there and play a little bit this season and see how it works out. So that one might be a little bit more up in the air. We know they like him a lot. He's a ball hawk. He does have great instincts. He has a nose for the football, and you need those kind of guys. You need those guys that can punch it out, that can intercept it, and he makes those big plays. So if he can deliver even more of those this season, then he probably will be in line for a nice contract.
And the thing they have working in their favor is, they had used the right of first refusal tender on him. It was misreported initially that it was a second round tender, but they used the right of first refusal tender, which means like he was available to be signed, and no one was giving up draft picks to sign him, and no one made him that offer sheet. So, they obviously they're negotiating against themselves right now if they were to give him an extension, but the fact that he sort of was available to anyone to some degree and no one made him that offer sheet, I think that gives the Browns a little bit of an opportunity to, if they see that, get a little bit of a below market deal on him and sign him for something that's pretty reasonable and just lock that position up for a few years. And if you move on sometime during that contract, that's fine. But I think much like Grant finding his role, I think Ronnie sort of finding that role as that deep safety. I think those guys kind of falling in line made them both better last year.
Yes, absolutely 100%. And I'm very eager to see what he's going to look like with E-Man on the field, and how his role changes a little bit, and where he's used and how he's used. And the thing about it is they have a new defensive coordinator, and Mike Rutenberg, the new DC, is very well versed in all things secondary. He somewhat specializes in the secondary. And so he is probably going to have some new thoughts, some new ideas on how he wants to play these guys and utilize these guys. And so I think we will see some different things. Maybe you'll see some more blitzing, some just different formations. You might see more zone defense. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Rudy is going to bring to the table and how it impacts all of the defensive backs, really. So, yeah, that's something to watch, I think, even in training camp a little bit. And then the other thing about Ronnie Hickman is the fact that he is a key special teams player, too. And sometimes uh, the the key value for a guy like that is on special teams, and it almost flies under the radar. But if you can be making that impact on teams, then you're going to find yourself with a new contract.
Okay, so let's stay in the secondary, and this is not specifically a free agent to be, but let's spend a little bit of time on another guy that, like Grant, and again, I don't think it was anything to read into, but Denzel was sort of he wasn't doing everything during minicamp, and it got some people kind of wondering is something going on with Denzel Ward, but Denzel talked a couple of times, first at his camp, then at a softball game, and he was pretty clear that there's nothing going on. He just wasn't at OTAs this year because he wanted to work on his own. Said he had a girlfriend now that he wants to take on dates. So good for Denzel. Congratulations on that. But when you look at the cornerbacks, Mary Kay, you look at some of the names here on this list, guys that make more money than Denzel Ward, Trent McDuffie, Ahmad Gardner, Derek Stingley, obviously he's one of the best young corners in the league. J.C. Horn, Jalen Ramsey, Patrick Surtain, Deron Bland, and A.J. Terrell. Denzel Ward has fallen from being the highest paid corner in the league pretty far down that list, and he's got 2 years left on that deal. And it does make me wonder if maybe he would be open to doing something with the Browns to kind of raise that number up a little more to reflect where he believes he is in the cornerback pecking order across the league.
Yeah, I think that he deserves a raise now that he has fallen down to ninth. And if that's something that he wants and they want to keep him happy, especially in the wake of the Miles Garrett trade, that could be a place where you throw a little bit of money and show him how much you appreciate him. And it seems to me that he's still playing his best ball as well. So he still has plenty left in the tank. So, I mean, he's somebody that I would still invest in. He's so good for Cleveland. He's from Cleveland. He's a tremendous leader and he always sets the tone. And it should be noted that he was not making any kind of a contract stand in mandatory minicamp. He had a little minor tweak of something, and they just did not want to take any risks with Denzel or with Grant Delpit. So, so basically, that's how that went down. They really still think very highly of him. He's in great standing with the team. And, he is someone that if you wanted to sweeten the pot a little bit, now that you don't have Joel and you don't have Miles and you have relieved yourself of some of the cap constraints with some of your guys, he is somebody that you might want to reward a little bit.
And I do think it would send a message to just this idea of, when you traded Miles Garrett and Andrew Berry was adamant, this is not a fire sale. This was just an opportunistic move to, trade Miles and bring in a good player like Jared Verse and add draft capital. It was a one-off. The best way to back that up is to basically back the Brinks truck up for Denzel Ward and basically say, we're going to recommit to you here for even more years than what's left on your deal. And we're going to, again, make you one of the highest paid cornerbacks in football and help you. I don't know if they would give him a market resetting deal, but I think it would be close at this point. I think that's what he would want. But I think that would also send a message that, like, hey, we've been saying this is not, we're not going to trade guys like Denzel Ward. We're not going to trade these veterans. And, there's no better way to kind of prove that than to, pay a guy like Denzel Ward.
Exactly. And once again, when you have someone that is so important in the community, so important on the team, such a vocal leader, he falls into that Joel Bitonio category of you want him to finish his career here. You want him to be a career Brown. He was there at the groundbreaking ceremony. He's one of their core players. So he's definitely someone that you want to keep very happy and you want to make sure that he finishes here on a great note.
So he is a free agent after the 2027 season. So he's got 2 years left on that deal. And then there's like 3 void years. So even just doing some of the math on that, they could even kind of spread out some of that money that's left on those void years and kind of extend that a little bit and even help themselves cap wise down the road. But again, even at his age 29, I would be comfortable paying Denzel Ward into his age 32 or 33 season. I do think obviously there have been, you do have to consider some of the concussion issues, and he is going to miss a few games every year. But I still think just physically, again, as long as the concussion thing doesn't become a bigger issue, I think physically he'll hold up into his 30s, into his early 30s.
Right. And he is a 5-time Pro Bowler. That is not an easy task. I think that could be the record for a cornerback here. I'd have to look that up again, but I think he's in that neighborhood as a 5-time Pro Bowler. And when you start stacking that many Pro Bowls, you start getting into almost Hall of Fame territory where you could end up being deliberated upon in those rooms at some point down the road if you're adding a couple of more all pro or some all pros and some more Pro Bowls to your resume. And the Browns would love nothing more than to have something like that happen for Denzel Ward. And he is still playing at the peak of his career. He is a lockdown corner. He's money on, whenever he's out there on his side of the field. And it's hard to find those kind of guys. And I do think that he can play well into his 30s and still be very, very effective. He's so healthy. He takes good care of his body. Of course, you mentioned the concussions. There will always be some issues here and there with Denzel, but for the most part, he answers the bell and plays very, very well.
Okay, so we were just throwing money at guys on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball is a little trickier. Some of the names here, and a lot of it is just because they've added real competition there, and they've added real competition through really high draft picks. So you kind of draft these guys like a Casey Concepcion, a Denzel Boston, a Spencer Fano. You draft them to start and play a long time for you, and that means some other guys that have maybe been around, maybe weren't drafted as high, maybe haven't performed at the level you want them to. Suddenly, they're fighting for jobs. Let's start with this guy, a guy we have talked about a decent amount on this pod, Dawand Jones. He's entering into the final year of his deal. Obviously, 3 straight years he's suffered season-ending injuries. It seemed like his rookie year, it was like, oh man, did the Browns just find like the steal of the draft when he was playing right tackle in place of Jack Conklin? He hasn't really built on that. And again, some of that is just because of the injuries. He's had to kind of keep himself in shape. That's been a struggle. But all of that said, Mary Kay, as we've said, he looks like he's in great shape, probably the best shape we've seen him in since he got here. And, whatever message was sent by drafting a left tackle and signing a right tackle, seems like Dawand Jones got that message. So I don't know what his long-term future is here. And I know they kind of redid that deal a little bit here in the final year. I don't know if he'll be here beyond this contract. It's not going to be for big money because they have gone, they made it pretty clear kind of who's going to start at those positions most likely. But is there a future here for Dawand Jones, do you think?
I think there is, or at least I think there can be. And I think this year could be pivotal for him. I think he's going to get playing time somewhere, somehow. I think they've been very impressed with what he's been able to do this offseason. He came back in great shape. He looks light and lean, and he had a really nice spring. And so much so that now they're talking about trying to find a way to get him on the field if he's one of the best 5 linemen out there. So he's somebody to keep an eye on in training camp and in preseason. And we know that they blew through a ton of offensive linemen last season. And even over the last several years, they've held that line together with smoke and mirrors. And I think he's going to get his opportunities. And when he does, it's up to him to show that he needs to be on the field all of the time. And if he can do that, then I do think that he has a future here. So I think this season is pivotal for him, whether he ends up starting at one of the guard spots or whether he is the swing tackle. I mean, George Warhop was not even prepared to call him a swing tackle because he's not conceding that Dawand Jones isn't going to start this season. So I think that's very significant. And I think it's a great opportunity for Dawand to seize the moment and show them what he's all about.
I think what's interesting is sort of how that right guard position in particular shakes out because it seemed like in minicamp they were willing to try pretty much everything. And some of this depends on Elton Jenkins. If they feel comfortable with starting Parker Brailsford at center, then that probably moves Elton Jenkins to guard and maybe it becomes a moot point. But as of right now, I would probably pencil in Jenkins as your center. And now you've got, obviously Tevin Jenkins, who's a little more of a natural guard, but we saw KT Leviston there a little bit. I'd be open to throwing Dawand Jones in there to see if he can move well enough to play that position, at least see what it looks like in camp. Austin Barber is the guy that might get some opportunities there. I think that competition is really interesting. And if a guy is looking for a chance to get on the field and actually play and not just be an extra lineman, that's the position. That's the one to really keep an eye on. And I do wonder, I don't think we saw Dawand get any reps there during minicamp, but I do wonder if we reach a point in training camp. Yeah, let's throw Dawand at right guard and just see what it looks like. Just see if he can move like we need him to move to play that position.
Right. And he's comfortable on that side. He really likes to play right tackle better than he likes to play left tackle. So sliding inside a little bit and trying him at right guard seems like it would make some sense. Now, I do remember Andrew Berry at one point saying that they had no plans to play him at guard, but those things can change when you look out there and you see someone who deserves to be on the field and is better than someone else. And if he's better than anybody else at that spot, then they should go ahead and give him that opportunity. And it can be swing tackle, but perhaps it will be at guard. And then it's just up to him to show what he can do with that.
And just, I mean, just the whole second unit on that line. It's kind of some interesting things up for grabs there, especially because I always keep coming back to they traded back into the third round to draft Austin Barber. Like they traded up to draft him, which is something Andrew Berry has rarely done. So obviously there was some reason they wanted to bring him in and have him on this football team. So that's one of those under the radar positions to keep an eye on is who's going to be the swing tackles, who's going to be the extra interior guys, and Dawand Jones is going to be right in that mix as well as probably competing with Titus Howard a little bit, even though they just gave Titus Howard a lot of money too. Ced Tillman, that's the other guy. And he's the one. So of those two, of Dawand and Ced Tillman, if I had to bet on who would be on the roster next year, I would bet on Dawand Jones over Ced. I think this is a really Ced's got to show something this year because that's a position where the Browns have invested a lot. And they brought in a guy who basically looks and plays like Ced Tillman with the number 39 overall pick. And there's some depth there. It's a real competition. And so it's going to be tough for Ced to kind of show that he deserves snaps over some of these guys. So he's going to have to fight. And that's what makes this year really interesting for him as he's set to be a free agent.
Right. And I would agree with you on that, that if you had to pick one of those two guys to be on the roster in 2026, I would probably pick Dawand Jones over Ced Tillman because it looks to me like perhaps the writing could be on the wall for Ced Tillman right now with, as you mentioned, the drafting of KC Concepcion and Denzel Boston. And as you mentioned as well, he has a similar body type to Denzel Boston. They're the contested catch guys that, you got to go down there and you got to squeeze yourself in between two defenders and grab that football. And Denzel is really, really good at that. So he's moved ahead of Ced Tillman for that job. And Ced's going to have to really, really come on strong in training camp to make this roster. And if he can't do that, then they will try to trade him somewhere in August, somewhere around the roster cut down date on August 30th. They will try to look around and see if they can't find someone that would be willing to give them something for Ced Tillman. He's a good receiver. It's just that now he doesn't have as much of an opportunity here. And you can kind of see that. You can see where this is going. I don't know when he would get on the field. You might play a lot of 3 wides, you might play 4 wides, but unless you have a very significant injury of one of these guys in training camp, it could be difficult for Ced to find a place. I think that's unfortunate. I like him as a player. I like him as a person. I like talking to him. But this could just be a situation where he might be best served by getting an opportunity somewhere else where he can actually get on the field.
And, in a weird way, this is what you want when you're building a roster is you want to have to make hard decisions. And it's not always fun. I mean, that's why Andrew Berry and all these guys make a lot of money. Like they have to sit down and make these hard decisions. And with said, there have been flashes. I mean, he had a stretch there with Jameis Winston where it kind of looked like, oh, maybe said has finally arrived. But then he got the concussion against Pittsburgh and didn't play again the rest of the year. And last year, I thought there were some moments last year, but health remained an issue and just kind of consistency has always been an issue. And, it is unfortunate, but these are the hard decisions you have to make. And I said it the other day. It's either a pod you're going to hear in July or a pod you heard a couple days ago. I said, like, the sign that you are starting to build a healthy roster is that you might have to make some hard decisions on guys like Ced Tillman and Dawand Jones.
Right. And that is something that we are going to see, I think, happen with more regularity as this roster starts to get stronger and as they use those early picks to parlay those into plenty of other players too, because they've really just mushroomed. I mean, there are so many good young players on this team now that something's got to give. And like I said, I think Ced could be one of the casualties of some of the really great things that have happened on this roster over the last 2 years. And if that does happen, I really do hope that he finds a new home and he can really flourish wherever he goes because he deserves it. He deserves it. He's worked very, very hard here. Now, last year, I think he missed 4 games. I can't remember if it was an ankle injury or a knee injury right now. But anyways, he was on IR. So he has run into some injury problems, but he still has worked really hard to get better and to improve and elevate his game. And I would like to see him have a nice, long, successful career.
All right, here's a doozy of a name to throw out 27 minutes into a podcast. A pretty big free agent on the offensive side of the ball, potentially. Deshaun Watson. I think for a lot of Browns fans, hearing that Deshaun Watson will be a free agent is exciting. They are ready to see the end of that 5-year contract. But there is also a scenario where Deshaun Watson wins the starting quarterback job and he stays healthy. And maybe he plays well enough to at least be a bridge quarterback or to be a veteran quarterback who earns. I always kind of throw out the Sam Darnold extension, which, somewhere in that 3-year, $30 million a year range, something like that, which I know sounds expensive, but for a quarterback, that's not expensive. I don't know if it would ever go that high or not, but this is an interesting one, Mary Kay. I guess what happens between now and December or January that would have us talking about a potential Deshaun Watson extension or a re-signing of Deshaun Watson?
Well, I think he would probably have to be a top 16 or 17 quarterback, somebody that could take you to the playoffs and contend for the playoffs and help this young offense pull it all together and go out and be explosive. If he can be something like he was in Houston when he made 3 Pro Bowls and took the team to the playoffs multiple times, then maybe you're on to something. And remember, Andrew Berry did tell us early on in Deshaun's career here that he hoped that this was going to be a 10-year proposition and that he would get to his second contract here. Remember that? I mean, that was like a zinger. And
yeah, I gotta say, so when he said that, I'm trying to remember exactly when he said that, but it was like so early in the process that I was a little surprised how surprised people were by that. Like,
right.
If you trade for a guy you think is a franchise quarterback, of course you want him to be around for 10 years. But you're right. That was something that certainly was like, wait a minute, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So they looked at him as a potential 10-year answer for them. And of course, it hasn't worked out like that, but there's still time. There is still time to see if they can salvage anything about Deshaun Watson here. And it's going to come down to health in my mind. I think it mostly is about his health. How does the Achilles hold up? How does the repaired shoulder hold up? He's definitely not the same quarterback right now that he was in Houston, but maybe he can get back up into the top 15, 16. And if he can do that, then maybe they do consider an extension for him. So it's a big pivotal year for him. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear that, but if he's playing winning ball and he's playing explosive offense, then I think that could change some minds.
Yeah, I think with him the results matter a lot. Like if you are winning games, if this team is like one of the surprise teams and he's playing, Lance Risen always uses the phrases quarterbacks you win because of and quarterbacks you win with. If he's kind of showing he's a quarterback you can win with, that's when you do start to entertain this idea of can you move forward with him, have a young quarterback behind him who's going to be ready to take over at some point. Can he be that guy? Because we have seen like teams are winning now with quarterbacks who are not necessarily top five guys. Jalen Hurts won a Super Bowl. you know, like, um, we saw maybe Bo Nix would have won a Super Bowl this year. He might have been in it had he played in the AFC Championship game. Sam Darnold just won a Super Bowl. So, yes, it's a lot easier when you have a Patrick Mahomes or someone like that, and that's obviously the goal. But we're seeing teams get to and win Super Bowls with guys on the fringes of the top 10. So I'm not saying that's what Deshaun Watson is going to be, but I think if he shows them that he could maybe be a guy like that, that's when they maybe look at this and say, yeah, you know what? We're still going to draft a guy, but also let's bring Deshaun back for 2 more years.
Right. And when you look at the weapons that they now have on this football team, when you're talking about Quinshawn and Harold Bannon and Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston and Isaiah Bond, really, really young guys. All those guys that I just mentioned are either heading into their first or second year in the NFL. If you have someone that can light those guys up, get them the ball, and you're scoring touchdowns and throwing touchdown passes, you're not going to give up on that easily. You're just not. The Minnesota Vikings found out quickly what happens when you let a Sam Darnold walk out the door. So if he can be like that, and then you pair it with what they're hoping is going to still be a top 5 defense, if they keep adding to it the way that they have, then maybe he is the quarterback that can help pull this together. So we can't rule anything out in that regard, but there are a lot of ifs involved.
Yeah, I don't think we're sitting here on June 24th saying, yep, Deshaun Watson is going to sign a 3-year extension at the end of the year. But this is the scenario where it would happen. And I do think it's one of those, like, if they go 5-12, then they're not going to do it. But if they go 8-9 and he plays pretty well, I mean, you almost have to think about it. You almost have to be like, all right, well, we got to at least see what can happen. Even if you have somebody ready to take over in the wings that you draft or something like that. So that's kind of the scenario that I think it would be. Let me see if there's anybody that we really missed here. As far as Malik Collins, that's an interesting
Yeah.
one because he was really good for this team. Last year, he's coming off a major injury, and he's an older guy, a veteran, but also if he's still really effective, Mary Kay, I think there's a case to maybe just kind of keep doing 1-year deals with him until the wheels fall off if the price is right.
Well, that's true. And one of the wheels did fall off last year in the form of a torn quad. And that is a difficult injury to come back from. He hasn't done anything yet. And they expect him to practice in training camp and to be ready for the season. But I still think as you get up in years a little bit, that's a tough injury to come back from and be who you were. Now, fortunately for him at the defensive tackle position, you're not a cornerback, you're not a safety or even a linebacker who has to go running all over the field. But still, you want to have good movement. You want to have explosiveness. You want to be quick off the ball, all of those kinds of things. So we're going to have to see where he's at right now in those respects. But Malik Collins had 6.5 sacks last year, despite the fact that he missed, I think it was the last 4 games of the season. So he could have actually been the first defender in the Myles Garrett era, in the 9 seasons of Myles Garrett, to reach double-digit sacks aside from Myles. Nobody else has been able to do that. And he was very close. He's very good at what he does, and he's good for the room. He's a good example for Mason Graham and for Mike Hall, and he's just a darn good, solid football player. So if he can come back strong from the quad, he has a chance to stick around.
Yeah, I mean, guys in that locker room just raved about him and to like his leadership, and he's pretty quiet with us. whenever we've talked to him. A nice enough guy, but just pretty quiet. But Mason Graham was adamant about how much he meant to him, and other guys you mentioned, and I even thought Zach Zinter, when he was going to get a start towards the end of the year, had a chance to talk to him, and I asked him like, who's kind of been helping you while you haven't been playing and while you've been kind of trying to figure things out. First guy he said was Malik Collins, like because Malik was going against him and he was giving him pointers and helping him out. So when we talk about that leadership piece and having those veterans, I think it's real with Malik Collins. Like he is one of those guys in that locker room that, maybe you got to go up and ask him, but when you do, he's going to help you out and he's going to give you advice and he's going to help these young guys.
Yeah, he was a really cool guy. He really was. And I think he might be one of those guys that is a little bit more vocal in the absence of Myles Garrett this year. I'm very curious to see who the guys are that are going to step up into that leadership space and actually take the bull by the horns a little bit more and just be a bit more assertive. So looking forward to seeing what he can do. And yeah, I really like him as a player, once again, and as a person. And I would like to see him stick around.
One last guy here, just as I was going through the list that I know we glossed over, Isaiah McGuire, and I wanted to talk about him real quick, just because former Barry draft pick, and also last year when the season started, he was the number 2 edge rusher, and then Alex kind of passed him, and Alex got his extension. Isaiah going into that contract year, there's an opportunity over there because with Myles gone, it's Jared Verse on whichever side he wants to line up on, and then it's Alex is the clear number 2 guy. That's what he's getting paid to do. But you need 3, 4, 5 of these guys. So, I don't think Isaiah is going to get an Alex Wright type of extension, 11 million a year, but he can, can he earn himself 5 million, 6 million a year, something like that, give himself a little bit of stability. This is an opportunity for him because as soon as that AJ Epinesa deal fell through, Mary Kay, it just kicked open the door for these guys who were the number 2, number 3, number 4 guys to have a chance to really compete and show something this year.
I think with Isaiah, it's going to depend in part on if they add another edge rusher. And if they really like the edge rusher that they add, he could become the third edge and sort of supplant Isaiah in that regard. So we'll have to see how that plays out, if they can find that guy and how he performs. But maybe Isaiah will kind of elevate his game and say, no, you're not doing that. I'm the third edge. I'm that guy. And that's what he's going to have to do if he wants to get that extension and be around after this year.
Yeah, and he's another one of those guys that here and there has kind of shown flashes and sort of shown some ability to maybe be an effective edge rusher. But we'll see kind of what he can do. I was just curious before we signed off here. I wanted to look at Deshaun Watson. So I threw out that like $30 million a year. That would actually be lower than the dead cap that they would have if they were to cut Deshaun Watson today. So there you go, Mary Kay. There's another case for extending Deshaun Watson. You can actually save yourself a little money on the cap if you extended him. I know that's exactly what Browns fans want to hear and want us to talk about more, but there you go. That'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Find us on all of your socials. Go look for Orange and Brown Talk. Give us a like, give us a follow. We're on all of them, so check those out. And of course, on YouTube, you can watch us Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.